Today is May 9th, 2013, and our interview subject today is Timmi Pierce, Executive Director of the Historical Society of Carroll County. Welcome, Timmi.
Well, thank you, Kathy, and Community Media Center for this opportunity.
Great. I know you're not a native of Carroll County, so why don't you tell us a bit about your background?
Well, I was born in Hartford, Connecticut, and my name has been in print many times over my many careers, but my first go-round with my name in print was in the sports column of the Hartford Courant. My father was a noted football star and captain of the Connecticut State team, Connecticut State College team, and he when I was born, it showed up in the sports column that noted outdoorsman and football hero Franklin Pierce had a girl. Better luck next time, Frank. So next time was 5 years later, and it was a sister. Yeah.
So you grew up in Connecticut?
I did, and I was and still am a born explorer. As soon as I could ride a tricycle, I was off on adventures around town, and we lived in an early 1800s two-family rented house that was located in Wethersfield, Connecticut, and we lived right behind the Connecticut State Penitentiary, which was the oldest continuously operating jail, penitentiary in the country. And around that penitentiary was a moat full of quicksand, and of course we were cautioned not to go play over there, but we sometimes did, but we didn't lose anybody in the process. I had a lot of adventures as a young child. I was tied up a tree by neighborhood kids and cut down by our newspaper boy. I was locked up in a wardrobe and left for many hours in the basement of a neighbor's house. And I was always getting into trouble, and my mother's call for me was a whistle, and the words to that whistle were, "Damn your curiosity," because she never knew where I was. So we moved on from Wethersfield to Des Moines, Iowa, and we took a overnight train trip, which was really quite exciting and quite horrendous, to Des Moines, because we had not only baby sister yowling, but we had two cats yowling, Gertrude and Hank, and I was quoted for many years afterwards in the family for waking up in the middle of the night and saying, "Are we going to have to spend another night on this damn thing?" Anyway, we got to Iowa and lived in an old house across from the governor's mansion, which was really kind of nifty, and I made my adjustments in Iowa until we returned to Yankee Land a couple of years later, living in the country with my grandparents, 3 cousins, aunt and uncle, and assorted cats. And anyway, that was sort of the early years.
Well, you moved around a lot after that, didn't you, as an adult?
I sure did. During my college years, I was at home during the summers. I went to college at Mary Washington in Virginia, and there learned that the Civil War did really not end when we thought it did. And I had a very hard time adjusting to some of the racist material and thoughts of people down there, including my history professor. So therefore, I only went to history class once every 3 classes or so because I just couldn't take it. But during the summers, I worked in theater. My lifetime plans had been to become a veterinarian, and having changed schools again my senior year of high school, I had a chemistry professor who flunked most of the class. I was lucky to get by with a D, but that was the end of my becoming a veterinarian. So my career plans changed to becoming a theater major, which totally horrified my family. And I worked in summer stock for 4 summers as a wardrobe mistress. I was technical director for a small equity company in Springfield one summer, and had lots of adventures during that time, including my first night on the job at Storeton Music Fair, which was a 2,200-seat musical theater. My job was to take because I knew horses, supposedly, my job was to take the 2 donkeys off stage and back to their paddocks during the run of Little Abner, and they were named Mint and Julep. So I got them up the aisle to the exit of the theater, and Mint sat down and Julep wanted to run like a bandit over to the paddock, so I was stretched from one end of the world to the other, but had a lot of interesting times in those theater years. So when I got out of college, I was locating in Washington. I did interview for a job at J. Walter Thompson in New York City in advertising, but they paid $60 a month, a week, and I thought there's no way, even I was smart enough at that age to know I couldn't live in New York City on $60 a week. So I readjusted my thinking and thought, well, what are your talents, what's your background? And it was art and writing. And I ended up at WTOP Radio, the CBS-owned station in Washington, for 2 years. And at the very young age of 24, I was interviewed by WRC, NBC in Washington, and became the manager of advertising and promotion at 24 for them, which was the youngest in network history. So anyway, I was at WRC in Washington for close to 8 years before being promoted to the network in New York. And while I was there, I became very involved in American Women in Radio and Television, was president of the association in Washington, volunteer position, and won many awards for our work at WRC and art direction and so on, and really had a very enjoyable time in Washington. When I went to New York for promotion, it followed my having co-led a class action suit against NBC in Washington on sex discrimination against women in 1970, took till 71 till we filed the suit. And of course, we all thought we were going to be fired. We weren't, and part of the payoff for me was the offer of a job in New York City. And I went up for the interview. I landed the position as manager of advertising and promotion for the NBC radio network, and then walked back to my hotel on 6th Avenue crying the entire way because I didn't want to leave Washington. I loved Washington. So from there, I went on to, while at NBC, because I had been involved in this class action suit, there were rumblings from the women and minorities in the network that they were going to bring suit. And I guess personnel in their infinite wisdom thought, well, you wanted trouble, we'll give you trouble. They made me director of affirmative action programs, and I was there for 8 years before leaving for another position. But I really helped make a difference in the hiring of women and minorities in high-paying positions on air and in technical positions, union positions, which were paid very well. And it made me happy because I had always been somewhat of a battler for animal rights and human rights. And so that was fulfilling.
What finally brought you to Carroll County?
Well, let me go back a little bit, can I?
Sure.
I went on to Planned Parenthood as director for communications from NBC, and that was, again, working for the rights to sexuality education and abortion. We were tagged as great promoters of abortion. We were not. We believed in education, but supported a woman's right to abortion. I left there after 3 years to open my own business, and had a lot of great experiences and made a decent living for almost 5 years doing that in advertising and marketing. And I remember one day thinking, well, I have to dress for success or dress for the mess. And I had a client who had bought the National Guard building, which was on the Historic Trust over in Brooklyn. And they were turning it into a self-storage facility. And I went up on top of that roof and mapped it all out to design absolutely incredible signage up there to attract clientele to that building. And it could be seen from Brooklyn and Manhattan and Staten Island and very high visibility until the trust threw a complete seizure, and we had to take the signage down. So I had always had a love of history, and I guess for the almighty dollar, I desecrated a historic building just temporarily for the betterment of my client. But anyway, I had a real variety of clients and enjoyed everything from working and starting up a preschool to setting up a veterinarian in practice and getting him launched successfully, and doing an interior decorating business, and lots of variety. So enjoyed that a lot until it looked like this self-storage company might be having some difficulties. They had to sell a facility in Philadelphia. And I thought, yeah, maybe I better look around for something a little more stable. And I ended up at Egger Healthcare Center as manager of communications. And that was a 375-bed healthcare center on Staten Island. And glory be, I didn't have to commute into the city or anywhere else. It was 10 minutes from my home. And I was there, again, I seem to do things in 8-9 year increments. I was there almost 9 years. So from there, I got into the Lutheran loop. I went to Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services as Director for Communications, and we were located on Park Avenue in New York City. And shortly after I was there, within a couple of years, we moved the agency to Baltimore, which is ultimately how I got to Carroll County. I was Director for Agency Advancement at Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services. And when 9/11 happened a year later, we crashed because 87% of our funding was from the government for refugee resettlement around the country through affiliates. And so my entire department went bye-bye, and I had to look around for other options. And I ended up at Carroll Lutheran Village selling real estate to people in the Wakefield and New section. And from there, I got to here, but here being the Historical Society. But I came to Carroll County thanks to Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service. So I was a refugee from New York, and the first time I drove over Route 140 coming down into Carroll County to look at the property actually that I now own, the farm, I thought, wow, I have died and gone to heaven, because I had been partially country raised, and I love it here.
So you just wanted to live in the country?
I did. And of course I came with a couple of horses, and I now have a farm, 18 acres in Finksburg, and I've always been a collector. I can still hear my father saying when we would go take trash to the dump in Iowa, I would go searching and collecting, and I can still hear him saying, put that down, and I wish he was still around to tell me put that down, because I have collected a lot of stuff in my time, and part of my retirement time will be spent cleaning it out.
But what year was it that you actually moved to Carroll County?
I actually moved here in 1999, and so I was still going into the city at that point to LIRS, and I came to the Historical Society in 2006, the very beginning of 2006. And candidly, I loved it. I thought, wow, this is a great opportunity, but looking at some of the financials and so on, I thought, well, this ought to be good for 6 months. And it's been 7.5 years.
Have you seen a lot of changes in Carroll County since you've been here?
I sure have. I have seen building, building, building. We're not seeing so much now, but my upper field on the farm was all just looking out over beautiful farmlands, and now there are houses all over the place up there. And yeah, I've seen changes. I've seen more traffic. I used to feel comfortable driving my horse, my Morgan, around on the roads outside my farm, and no longer do I feel comfortable doing that. There's too much happening on, even though they're country roads. And I forgot to mention I was a competitive carriage driver, and showing in my beloved Morgan, who's still with me, although he's taken a couple of detours wanting to die on me from colic, but he's 27 and he's in good shape, and I look forward to being able to bring him back to some light carriage driving around the farm.
Well, director at the Historical Society is certainly different than any of the other career choices you've had.
I've been all over the map in careers,
but
in different venues.
You had mentioned some stories of things that you found when you were a child, so you had a lifelong interest in history.
I did. I remember not only what I used to pick out of the dump and have to return, but really connecting with things that I found, that thinking about the people that had owned them and where they had lived and so on. And when I was a Girl Scout in camp, we took a long overnight hike, and one of the things that we did was we explored an abandoned house, and in that house I found a newspaper with the death of John Greenleaf Whittier on the front page. He was a very noted, for those who may not know, he was a noted Quaker poet. In fact, he was so beloved in New England that they actually had days off from school on his birthday. And also on the front page was a write-up on the Sullivan and Corbett fight. Now, those were two contenders boxing way back there in the 1890s. And so that was kind of the beginning of exploration for interesting items. And that may have been anything from arrowheads to cannonballs to Sabino glass I've collected, and I still wish I could hear my father saying, "Put that down." Anyway.
Well, and you had a relative in the museum field, didn't you?
I did indeed, and that was a special trip. It was a 8th grade class trip from Massachusetts up to New York City. First time to see New York City and look at skyscrapers and be overwhelmed, because I was living a country existence at that time. And my cousin, Kay Beneker, was director of exhibits for the Museum of Natural History, and she took us up, a friend of mine and I, we were able to separate from the group and take a taxi cab, wow, across down to, excuse me, the Museum of Natural History. And Kay graciously met us, toured us around the museum, and then took us up into the loft on the top of the building where, and it was a city block, as I remember. It was immense, where they made all of the displays for everything that they showed in the museum. And I watched a man who was making a glass flower, and Kay told us that it would take him 1 year to make that one flower for one display. So Kathy, don't think that putting your exhibits up is an endless task.
Well, some people may not be terribly familiar with the Historical Society. Can you tell us a little bit about the
Sure.
organization and its
Sure.
history?
Yeah. It was founded in 1939. There was a icon here in the county by the name of Mary Shellman, who started, by the way, the first Memorial Day parade. And it is one of the, if not the oldest, continuously running in the county. But her house was right there on East Main Street, and she aged out and ultimately ended up in Texas, living with a nephew. And there had been many people of note that had lived in the Shellman house, including Shrivers briefly. And when she had to leave, there were plans to tear the building down, which would have been a terrible sacrilege, and not only her history, but a lot of county history that happened in that building. So a group of concerned citizens, mostly led by Test Kimmy, and of course we now own her house thanks to the county. She led the parade to save the building, and it was going to be, a garage was going to be put up where her home had been. So they collected the $30,000 that was needed to take over the ownership of the Shellman house, and the garage was put across the street, and the city inn was demolished to make room for the garage. So progress, I guess, not really. But the Shellman house now is a house museum, thanks mostly to donors of people to our from people to our collection, and Kathy's good work in putting together the first floor as a house museum for school tours. And many children have kind of seen the light bulb go on about the value of history and learning history, which isn't totally focused on in public school education anymore. My editorial comment.
Well, you've been with the Society for over 7 years.
Right.
And now you're getting ready to retire.
Right.
So as you look back, what would you say are some of your major accomplishments?
I think being able to get the support for the renovation of Cocky's, the Society had bought it in the year 2000 after there had been a fire along the side of the building and into the kitchen. And it had been a very good restaurant, but it was not insured, so the owner had to sell it, and the Society bought it, and it laid fallow for many years until we could get the support of the state first with a $200,000 bond, and then later the county with it took $550,000 and the 200 plus another 125 that the county kicked in to thoroughly renovate the building for community use. So now that building is absolutely gorgeous, if I do say so myself. And on the second floor is the Kuntz Yingling Learning Center, which is available for rentals and meetings, and there are 2 conference rooms up there, but the first floor has exhibit space, and please go see the Civil War 1863 exhibit that's showing in khakis. It's open Tuesday through Saturday from 10 to 4, and there are many incredible items in there from the Civil War and Carroll County during the Civil War. And on the right-hand side, as you enter Khakis, is the shop at Khakis. And that is a museum, shop, and bookstore and showcase for county artists and artisans and craftspeople. And it is stocked to the gunnels. It is a beautiful shop, and it is an income producer for the Historical Society, which these days is important. So visit the shop at Khakis. This is all 216, 210, and 206 are our buildings on East Main Street in Westminster.
Well, what's been your favorite part of the job?
I think it's the variety. It's being able to bounce from a finance committee meeting, and finance has never been my strong suit, although I have raised a lot of money as a fundraiser, but I let somebody else do the spending. From a finance committee meeting to a programs committee meeting where some very good minds, and Kathy staffs that committee, where they are developing the calendar for events and for our monthly box lunch talks on historical subjects. And they do a lot. And then, bouncing over to a development committee meeting where we worry about how we're going to bring in more funds, to properties, to how we're taking care of them and what needs to be done next. And I think some of my better legacies, in addition to what Khakis was a bequest I was able to get from a friend and member who made out her will and died shortly thereafter. I mean, she was perfectly fine. We really didn't have any desire to see Doris Walters leave, but she did. And she left us a substantial amount of funds for the maintenance of the 3 historic properties. So that was a very important bequest, and one I am very thankful for.
Well, having been there for a while, I know all kinds of things happen. Do you have some favorite stories that you'd like to tell?
Well,
or that you can tell?
Let's see, being called by the DAR, who was using the building one Saturday to come fish a rat out of the toilet upstairs. Then when I got there, it wasn't a rat at all, it was a bat, and it had drowned, so I fished the drowned bat out of the toilet, and their meeting went on peacefully after some chit-chat about that. We have had our share of explorers, and Kathy is very familiar with all of these, of critters in the different buildings. And I was responsible for the squirrel getting into the building, into Kimmy, and so I felt I was responsible for getting the squirrel out. And I put some food in my wastebasket this was on a Friday, in my wastebasket in my office, and let him have free access to the office. And the squirrel, I went back Saturday morning, and the squirrel had indeed gotten into the wastebasket and couldn't get out, so I threw some file folders on top of the wastebasket and took him out and turned him loose. So there have been little incidents like that that have happened along the way, and I have been very enriched by the volunteer support that we have at the Historical Society. People may not know it, but we actually have only 2.5 staff members. Well, 2.5 when I leave. There will be a new exec coming in. But we handle an awful lot insofar as events, a research library, and so on. And if we did not have this core of very dedicated volunteers that work on all kinds of things, we would not exist, because they really provide the impetus for much of what we do.
So what do you think will be some of your favorite memories?
Well, outside of the bats and the squirrels, it will be actually rounding up the people to support us when we presented at an open hearing at the county to really up our county's support. And we plastered everybody with little stick-on signs, and it worked. We got a good upgrade in money to support our operations, and maintenance. Maintenance is always a challenge. I think being able to involve so many different people from the community in different programs and some of the special events that we have pulled off. Antiques Appraisal Day was well underway when I joined, but we have grown that significantly. We have grown the soiree, which is another fundraiser. And there have been many favorite memories of stories that I have been told by visitors to the Historical Society, and many different, including interpretations. For instance, Jeb Stewart, who rode through on his way to Gettysburg, and who picked up Mary Shellman as a 14-year-old because she was slinging Yankee slurs at Jeb Stewart, and he brought her up onto his horse and gave her a kiss. I wasn't there for that, but the story was great. And there is a legend that Jeb Stewart spent the night at Cocky's, and that he had women of the night in Cocky's. Now, I don't know how rich Carroll County was in women of the night, in other words, prostitutes, but that legend kind of lives on, which is kind of humorous. but that is credited with his being late to get to Gettysburg and why they got clobbered in Gettysburg during the war. So, and lots of family stories and lots of sharings of poignant moments in families, and learning about the very rich roots in the county. And of course, I name my radio program that is heard every Sunday morning in what we in broadcasting used to call ghetto time at 7:45 in the morning, but naming my radio program Old Roots, New Roots, because our challenge is to honor the old roots and to make sure that the new roots are going to keep county history alive for many more generations.
What do you think you're going to miss the most about working at the Historical Society?
The camaraderie, the people, the stories, and I plan to still volunteer for special events and so on, but on my own schedule. Won't that be nice?
Well, it sounds like you're really looking forward to retirement. Do you have any specific plans?
Oh, I do. I plan to really learn how to put together a good website and to use Photoshop and to travel up and down the East Coast to visit friends and family I haven't seen in a while, and to explore Western Maryland. I have only been out to Western Maryland once since I have been here, and I was blown away by the Catoctin Mountains, and I want to really do some real exploration out there of historic sites and so on. I am planning to write a couple of books. One of them will be a children's book on based on my Morgan horse, my original Morgan, who at 27 is still with us and still escapes. And he made his first escape as a 3-day-old when he was born at the breeders in Massachusetts. But I plan to start it with his escape from his mommy from in utero, and I have a couple of good friends who can do some of the pencil art, so there will be an educational component to this book and entertaining stories of where he got to when he escaped and what he did and what he saw in his journeys. And then I am planning a novel loosely based on my very multifaceted life. So, among other things.
It sounds like you're going to be very busy.
Yeah, I should be.
Do you have any other stories that you want to tell us, or?
I think you want to prompt me? Is there something I should talk about?
No, whatever you'd like to talk about. If there's any last stories that you want to tell.
I think I am about storied out for now.
Okay, that's great. Well, thank you for coming, and good luck with your retirement.
Thank you. That happens on the end of May, so the Memorial Day parade will be my swan song, so to speak.
Great. Well, good luck.
Thank you.